Today, at the Miskatonic University, we will be discussing the history of a 4-story townhome located in Mayfair, London, and the first investigation carried out by our M.A.R.I division resulting in the capture of a cryptid. 50 Berkeley Square has been home to many over the 240 years it has been standing, and since then has had many souls lost within its walls. In 1789, a young woman named Adeline, who lived in the home with her uncle who abused her, was found on the walkway outside, either being pushed by her uncle or jumped to escape his wrath. Adeline's presence was seen hanging outside the 3rd-story window and falling to the ground before disappearing. She has also been seen wandering the halls of the home by many lodgers throughout the home's history. The little girl was possibly murdered by her nanny in the house, but there are only rumors of spectral children to support this theory. In 1800, the future Prime Minister of Britain, George Cannon, bought the building as his home. Cannon reported many odd goings-on, including random noises and bangs all throughout the house, as well as seeing the spirit of Adeline and the spirits of children running through the halls. In 1827, the house was purchased by Elizabeth Curzon. Curzon rented rooms to different lodgers, with one being Thomas Myers. Myers was abandoned at the altar by his fiancée and living in solitude within the attic. As the span of 10 years passed, his sanity dwindled. He was heard by neighbors screaming and shouting at night. Rumors state that in hidden tunnels accessible through the basement, he used occult magic and the dark arts to try and win his love back. Another lodger, Mr. Dupree, was said to have locked his mentally unstable brother in a room in the basement. He had no contact with the outside world, save to retrieve food from a hole cut in the wall by his brother. He eventually died in the basement. In the 1840s, Robert Warboys was dared to stay a single night in the home. He was allowed to stay only if he kept a pistol with him and used the waiter bell if anything strange were to happen. That night, he was heard frantically ringing the bell and screaming, as well as a single gunshot. He was found alone in a corner of the room, in a state of shock, still holding his gun out in front of him. He ran from the house before he could explain what he saw and never returned. In 1872, politician Lord George Littleton was heavily drinking with a few companions of his and stayed in the same room as Warboys on a dare as well. Littleton had brought a shotgun with him, knowing the rumors about the building. He stated that in the middle of the night, a gelatinous black tentacled creature appeared and lunged at him. He shot at it, however, when he went to investigate, there was nothing but buckshot in the floorboards and an unknown gooey residue. In 1878, the property was bought by new owners who had hired a live-in nanny and allowed her fiancé to live with her in the attic, which had been turned into a bedroom. One night, she went upstairs to prepare the room for bed when she was heard screaming in absolute terror. When they found her, she could only repeat, "Don't let it touch me," over and over again. That night, she was committed to a sanitarium. The next night, her fiancé slept in the room and had his service pistol with him. The owners heard a scream and a gunshot. When they went upstairs, they found him in the middle of the room with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. His fiancée died in the sanitarium that same night. In 1887, 2 sailors by the names of Robert Martin and Edward Blunden, after a night of heavy drinking on leave from the HMS Penelope, found themselves in front of the now abandoned building. They forced entry and stayed on the 2nd floor. Blunden awoke later that night to footsteps approaching from outside the door as Martin stay asleep. Then he noticed a noise emanating from the corner of the room. When he turned to look, he saw the same shapeless creature that Littleton saw. It slowly moved towards the sleeping sailor with a squelching noise. Blunden saw an iron fire poker and grabbed for it, but it was too late as the creature lunged at Blunden and wrapped itself around his face. Martin awoke to the horror and ran away without helping his companion. A few streets down, he ran into a constable. They ran back to the building and found Blunden impaled on the fence outside, apparently jumping from the 2nd-story window. The creature was not located at the scene. After the incident with the two sailors went public, the university was able to send the M.A.R.I division to London to investigate. In 1890, the unit comprised of 4 paranormal investigators whose names were redacted, likely to them being students of the university, and 2 armed guards labeled as Agent 33 and Agent 96. Their operation, which was to be fairly simple given the abandoned nature of the building, was to first send in the paranormal investigation team, equipped with, at the time, classified experimental devices on loan by the U.S. government for field testing. They started the investigation by sweeping the building from the 1st floor to the 4th floor. They captured no anomalous activity on the 1st floor. On the 2nd floor, they were not able to make contact with, but recorded what seemed to be the spirit of a young girl at play, caught in what we have labeled as a Mobius cycle, in which a spirit is stuck replaying a specific event from their life over and over again. She was happy and apparently playing hide-and-seek. She didn't seem to be aware of any of the investigators. On the 3rd floor, they made somewhat broken contact with the spirit of Adeline through a device similar to a tape recorder. When they played back the recording, they could hear her voice but could not make out what she was saying. She would also occasionally answer yes or no questions by knocking once for yes and twice for no, but she did not answer every question. She seemed somewhat aware but possibly confused. The attic showed signs of heavy poltergeist activity, where tables were flipped and cups and knives were thrown at the investigators. However, the team was not able to make contact with anyone or anything. When it was time to investigate the cellar, the paranormal unit was split, with 2 staying on the 3rd floor to continue trying to make contact with Adeline. The other 2 descending to the cellar, accompanied by 2 armed guards, as this is where they were expecting to find the creature. The team recorded what sounded like disembodied moans and wails, as well as demonic growls and grunts on their recording equipment. In addition, there was an unusually high amount of radiation that they were able to record with very rudimentary experimental equipment, again on loan from the U.S. government. This was the same kind of radiation that can be found in different pockets out in space. As they moved through the round corridors which led to the sewers of London, they were able to make their way to a chamber which looked like it was once used as an alchemic laboratory, but it seemed as though it hadn't been in use for many years and was found in a state of disarray. This is where, in the corner of the chamber, they found the creature. It was much larger than they expected given the size depicted in the stories. It must have been feeding on rats and animals lost in the sewers. It seems to resemble an octopus, but with more tentacles and less of a defined main body. It was somewhat translucent, but where it did have some color, it seemed to be dark brown, and it secreted a black inky slime from its skin. Agent 33 tried to catch it by stabbing his knife through one of its tentacles when it moved up onto a wooden table. But it seemed to be able to move through the blade as though it was cutting through water. The creature then phased through the table and back onto the floor, making a squishy noise as it connected with the cement brick ground. It then let out a high-pitched screech and jumped through the air at one of the investigators, wrapping itself around his upper body and head. Agent 96 shot at the creature with his pistol, and the investigator that the creature had attached itself to fell to the ground. Then the creature removed itself from him and lunged up towards 96, but was knocked out of the air by 33, who had picked up an iron rod he had found in a pile on the floor. The creature seemed to have an aversion to iron, the substance apparently burning its flesh. It rolled into a corner where it whimpered and nursed its wounds. 96 noticed a large chest lined with iron in another corner of the chamber, and had 33 help him tip it over and open it. The chest was empty aside from a dried, black, tarry substance. 96 had 33 and the second investigator, who had apparently fallen to the floor in the fetal position as soon as he saw the creature, take an iron rod in each hand and in a 3-point figure herd the creature into the chest. 96 secured the chest while 33 checked the down investigator. Apparently, the bullets phased straight through the creature and mortally wounded the investigator. After the armed team swept through the rest of the adjoining tunnels and closed off the entire area, as well as doing one last sweep of the entire home, the Occult Properties Unit were allowed to go in and seize all artifacts and items in the laboratory. We found that the rumors of Thomas Myers practicing occult magic in the cellars were true. He was responsible for summoning the creature into our realm through dark magical practices. It seems that Myers had somehow obtained a few fragments of the original Necronomicon, and have summoned what we at the university have designated as an invisible cephalopod. The creature was sent back to the United States, where the university was able to study it briefly before handing it over to the U.S. government for study and classification. The Miskatonic University, as well as the M.A.R.I division, have seen these creatures many times since then, as well as many other creatures, entities, and locations that have baffled and frightened the minds of many who have come across them. And as time goes on, we will continue to study, investigate, and document these anomalous properties to better understand this world and the many others we live and coexist within.